The year is 39 AD. The Roman Senate, a chamber built to echo with the voices of statesmen and the weight of empire, has fallen silent, not because of war, not because of famine, but because of a horse. Into the hall strides Incitatus, draped in a cloak of imperial purple, with a golden necklace glinting under the torchlight. At his side walks an imperial attendant, not as master, but as servant, and there, in front of Rome's most powerful men, this horse is offered a seat of honor, a senator's chair. Eyes widen, whispers curl along the marble columns. Was this a joke, a moment of madness? But none dared laugh, because the man who placed the horse there, the man whose ring the senators now kiss, was Emperor Gaius Caligula, a god to some, a lunatic to others, but above all, untouchable. His word was law, his wrath fatal, and in that moment Rome was not ruled by reason or senate or sword. It was ruled by spectacle. But here's the question historians still whisper today. Was Caligula truly mad? Or was he staging the greatest act of political revenge the empire had ever seen? Because sometimes when power feels threatened, the most dangerous man in the room isn't the one who swings the sword. It's the one who laughs while he breaks tradition and dares you to say something. And Caligula, he wasn't just laughing, he was making sure Rome laughed with him, or bled trying. This isn't just the story of a horse in the Senate. This is a story about humiliation, power, psychological warfare, and the dangerous cost of silence. So how did Rome allow this to happen? And more importantly, why? Let's go back to where the madness began, to the boy they called Little Boots. The descent had already begun. The battlefield was silent, but alive with tension. A thick mist hung low over the Germanic valley, a white shroud concealing death. It was dawn. The sun had not yet pierced the horizon. Only the sound of clinking armor and the breath of nervous men stirred the silence. And then the ground trembled, not from the marching of Roman feet, but from thunderous hooves. Through the fog came a single rider, a Roman cavalryman galloping alone from the hills, his silhouette massive atop a warhorse clad in leather and iron. Behind him the mist swirled, and shadows followed. But these weren't Romans, they were Germanic scouts, and they had spotted the Roman camp. Word spread like wildfire through the barbarian ranks. The Romans had arrived, just 5,000 of them. Laughter rippled through the barbarian tents. Fools, they said, they've come to die. But they didn't understand what they were facing, because that horse, that lone rider, was bait. And the fog, it wasn't their ally, it was part of the plan. Inside the Roman camp, General Gaius Flavius stood still. He wasn't watching the mist. He was listening to it. He could hear the hoofbeats. He knew the enemy had seen what he wanted them to see. And now, the trap would close. He turned to his tribune and whispered one word: advance. From the trees, from behind hills, from the low ridgelines, Roman maniples began to emerge like ghosts, silent, coordinated, brutal. The fog had hidden them well, and now, like a blade unsheathing, they began their work. This was not a battle of strength, it was a battle of psychology, and Gaius Flavius knew how to fight that war. The crowd erupted when Caligula became emperor. For years, Rome had staggered under the shadow of Tiberius, cold, cruel, and distant. But when the young prince walked into the forum, smiling, gracious, kissing babies and pardoning enemies, Rome rejoiced. They called him the New Dawn, the heir of Augustus, the return of the Golden Age. But dawn can be deceptive. Soon, something strange began to surface. At first, it was whispers. Caligula dressing in silk robes patterned after Jupiter's. Caligula asking to be addressed not as Caesar, but as Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. temples were ordered to be rebuilt in his image. Statues of Jupiter, Mars, even Mercury. Their heads were removed and replaced with Caligula's likeness, and not just in Rome. From Carthage to Alexandria, governors were told to instruct their priests, worship the emperor or lose their lives. In one infamous incident, Caligula demanded his statue be erected inside the sacred Jewish temple in Jerusalem. An act so provocative, so blasphemous, that only a direct intervention from his friend, the governor Petronius, narrowly prevented outright rebellion. But Caligula wasn't finished. He began appearing in public dressed as Hercules or Apollo, shirtless with a lion's pelt draped across his shoulders, golden club in hand. He painted his face red like Mars, the god of war, and rode across the Palatine like a god descending from Olympus. At night, he hosted strange feasts in the imperial palace. No senators, no advisors, just actors, gladiators, and dancers, all forced to perform scenes where Caligula vanquished the gods of old and declared a new pantheon, himself alone at the top. To the Roman elite, it was madness, but to Caligula it was justice. He once said, "If they feared Tiberius as a man, they shall worship me as a god." This wasn't power, and it was delusion armed with absolute authority. But here's the question that haunts history. Was Caligula truly insane? Or was this all a mask, a terrifying performance designed to break Rome's mind before he broke its laws? Because behind the robes of Jupiter was still a man. A lonely boy, once poisoned and orphaned, raised on whispers and betrayal. And now, with the world at his feet, he was rewriting reality. Rome didn't yet know it, but the man who wore a god's face had declared war on the idea of truth itself. The Roman Senate was once the temple of logic, law, and tradition, but now it had become a stage, and Caligula was both playwright and god. When he promoted his horse Incitatus to senator, the empire gasped, but no one laughed. Because this wasn't comedy, it was conquest. Caligula understood something terrifying. If he could make the absurd real, then he could make anything real. If he could force a room of the empire's wisest men to bow to a horse, he could force them to accept any horror he invented. The laws of reason abolished. The rules of dignity erased, all replaced by one principle. The emperor's madness was the new logic. But here's the genius hidden beneath the insanity. It wasn't madness, it was strategy. Each absurd act was a psychological strike, declaring war on Neptune, demanding divine status, addressing crowds dressed as Jupiter. Caligula didn't want respect, he wanted obedience. And fear, he knew, was more reliable than admiration. The senators couldn't resist because resistance required a shared reality. Caligula shattered that. What do you rebel against when there are no rules? What is tyranny when even the definition of real has dissolved? By confusing his enemies, he conquered them. By humiliating them, he made them complicit. Every time a senator saluted a horse or praised a statue, they lost a piece of themselves. Their pride, their sanity, their soul. All fed into Caligula's machine of control. He weaponized unpredictability. The court never knew whether they'd be rewarded or executed. That uncertainty made them silent, and silence made them controllable. In private, whispers circulated. Perhaps Caligula was touched by the gods. Perhaps his madness was divine. But deep down, the truth was darker. He wasn't a lunatic. He was a tactician of terror. Rome had faced legions, barbarians, revolts, but never this, a ruler who turned the empire's mind against itself. He didn't conquer lands, he conquered belief. And in doing so, Caligula didn't just break the Senate, he broke reality. Rome, once the center of the civilized world, is now a stage for one man's delusion. The imperial palaces glitter with gold. the statues gleam, but beneath the surface, panic simmers. Caligula no longer rules. He terrorizes. He taxes the most sacred moments of private life. Weddings, funerals, even lawsuits. Want to marry? Pay him first. Want to grieve? That too costs coin. Then comes the war, not against Parthians, not against Germans, against Neptune, the god of the sea. In a manic display of divine ego, Caligula marches his legions to the shores of Gaul and commands them to attack the ocean. Soldiers thrust spears into waves, catapults fire at the horizon, and when the battle ends, they collect seashells, spoils of war, he says, and send them back to Rome in triumph. No one laughs. Not the soldiers, not the Senate, not the people, because it's not funny anymore. Then he turns darker, more intimate. He orders senators' wives into public brothels to shame them, to humiliate their husbands. He forces nobles to fight as gladiators. Rome's highest class now kills for amusement, and if someone speaks out, they disappear. Informants slither in every corner. Whispers become daggers. Eyes betray. Trust vanishes. The senators, the most powerful men in the empire, now crawl in fear. One day, Caligula announces he will eliminate them all, starting with the richest. The next day, he kisses their children. It's not tyranny that keeps them silent, it's madness. Because madness can't be reasoned with. You can beg a tyrant, you can bribe him, threaten him, plan against him. But a madman, he may spare you today and crucify you tomorrow just to hear you scream. The entire city lives in suspense. Each morning, Rome wakes wondering who will vanish next. Will it be a friend, a lover, a priest, a prefect? Caligula has weaponized unpredictability, and it works. Because fear isn't just about violence, it's about the anticipation of violence, about knowing that logic is dead. That power now answers only to whim. The Senate remains frozen, the people hide, and the empire, the most powerful force on earth, bows not to a conqueror but to a man who has declared war on reality itself. Rome is no longer ruled. It is held hostage. The marble corridors of the Palatine Palace whisper secrets. Shadows stretch longer, faces grow colder, and behind every pillar, a dagger might be hiding. By now, even Rome's most powerful men no longer felt powerful. They felt hunted. Senators, once proud to debate ideas, now debated survival. Praetorian guards, once hand-picked defenders of the emperor, began to fear they were mere pawns in his demented theater. No one knew who would be punished next, or why. The man who called himself a god had become untouchable by law, but not by steel. It began as hushed conversations in torchlit corners. Then it turned to plotting. Those closest to Caligula, and not enemies but his own protectors, decided that the only way to save Rome was to end its emperor. Among them, Cassius Chaerea, a veteran Praetorian officer, humiliated and mocked by Caligula for years. The emperor would taunt him, call him names, question his masculinity, turning discipline into theater and loyalty into ridicule. Chaerea wasn't just angry, he was broken and ready. January 24th, 41 AD, Caligula walks through a narrow underground passage after a theatrical performance. No armor, no ceremony, just silk robes and divine arrogance. He's surrounded by his bodyguards. The irony, his killers are standing inches away. Suddenly, a cry, then steel flashes. A blade plunges into his neck, another into his ribs, then again, and again, and again. No grand battle, no defense, just blood pooling on marble, the self-proclaimed god dying like any man. But even in death, he resists. Some say his final moments were filled with shrieking curses, others with eerie laughter. Did he see his own madness die with him, or did Rome inherit it? Nearby, his wife and daughter are slaughtered, not for justice, but to ensure no heir would rise. Rome didn't weep, It sighed, but what followed wasn't peace. It was silence, not the kind that brings relief, but the kind before a storm. Caligula was dead, but the system that allowed him to rise, still alive. His madness had been stabbed, not cured. His fall wasn't the end of tyranny. It was proof that emperors weren't gods, and gods could bleed. The Senate floor is quiet again. The horse is long gone, the emperor too, but the echo of hooves still haunts Rome. Incitatus wasn't just a prank, he was a prophecy. Caligula's madness wasn't random, it was surgical. In promoting a horse, he desecrated the last illusion of Roman dignity. He made senators bow to an animal, not because he believed in its worth, but because he wanted to show Rome its worthlessness. And Rome complied. Not a single senator walked out. Not a single general protested. Not a single citizen rebelled. Because by then, Caligula had already won, not just over their bodies, but over their minds. The horse was never the joke. The people were. The Roman Empire, at its peak of civilization, with aqueducts and legions and marble palaces, was brought to its knees by a man who crowned a beast. Not because the beast had power, but because no one else had the courage to stop him. Think of that. They say history repeats itself. First as tragedy, then as farce. But in Rome's case, it was the farce that revealed the tragedy. Incitatus remains a mirror held up to every empire since. He asks the uncomfortable question, how absurd does power have to become before people say, enough? We look back at Caligula and laugh. But the truth is, he understood something terrifying about human nature. That fear is stronger than reason. That power doesn't need justification, only obedience. And that if you make madness predictable, people will submit to it, even love it. So maybe the horse wasn't madness at all. Maybe it was the only honest thing in the empire. An animal wearing purple robes, surrounded by silence, no speeches, no corruption, just a creature doing what it was told, innocent, obedient, worshipped. As the senators bowed their heads, it wasn't to Incitatus. It was to the idea that power, any power, no matter how mad, must be obeyed. And that's the real horror, that a horse in the Senate wasn't the end of Rome. It was the beginning of something worse, a world where truth doesn't matter, where the absurd is normalized, and where tyranny doesn't arrive with swords, but with hooves. Final thought. Look around your world today. Are the hooves echoing again?